Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:02 p.m. on Saturday, June 11th, and that means it's time for another in Western Liberty Network's ongoing series of Saturday Zoom trainings. Today, we have our Washington State Director and Chair of the Informed Citizens Network up there, Ken Morse. He'll be joining us in just a little bit, but there are a couple of things that I have to go through first. My lawyer wants me always to remind everyone that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization. As such, the organization does not endorse or oppose any political party or any specific candidate. What we do is we train limited government grassroots activists how to work for the campaigns they care about. And we also train them how to be citizen lobbyists and how to get elected to local nonpartisan office. How they choose to use that information is completely up to them once they receive the training. And also, what we're about is encouraging people to take responsibility for their own self-governance by giving them the skills they need to, in fact, reweave the fabric of our political culture, as we like to say. So any statement by our guests, our guest trainers, or participants are their own responsibilities and not necessarily the opinion or thoughts of Western Liberty Network. I'm going to share the screen briefly. And for those of you who are new or who might be viewing the recording, this is Western Liberty Network's homepage. And encourage you to look at that. Western Liberty Network will redirect you to this page. And this is where you can always find out what's going on with Western Liberty Network. As you can see, our current event is always at the top. This is Ken. This is advertising the training that we're about to begin shortly. If you scroll down, you'll see stories about other things we have done. Like here's a training conference that we had in Klamath Falls. Here's our annual training conference that we held in Vancouver, Washington, and so on and so forth as you go down. As you scroll down, on the left, you'll see a description of what happened. And on the right, you'll often see resources. These are recordings. This is a recording of a session on how to organize around local issue. Here, these are PowerPoints on how to use social media. This is a sort of a pictorial of our conference. And here is a speech from Dennis Linthicum he gave at our event up in Washington, Christina Soltes, who is a city councilor in Covington. There are lots of resources down here that you can look at. And of course, all of them are available free of charge. If you want more training information, just go to our training tab. Up top, you'll see the kinds of training that we provide. We do on-site live group training for people. We don't charge for those. We also do online and on-demand training like what you're seeing right now. And we also have an annual conference. Those aren't free because we have a hotel contract that we have to make. But we have all these methods of delivering training to you, including online methods. If you scroll down a little farther, you'll see that we have a number of documents you can download. These are training documents designed to be provided with a live training session, but they stand up well on their own. For example, if you would like to look at the one on effective campaigning with little or no money, just click on it and you will get the PDF document that you can download or print as you like, and you can study this. All of our materials are free to distribute as you wish. None of them are copyrighted. You can distribute them as you think will be helpful to yourself or other activists. And at the bottom, we always have a file that says download a PDF containing all of the above training documents. So if you want to download them all, just click down here and you'll be able to get them all. We're always producing new topics, new trainings, and we're constantly updating these documents. So these are all available to you free of charge. If you are part of a group or an organization that thinks you would like live training, let me know and we'll arrange a training at one of the meetings of your group free of charge on site. If you scroll down farther, you'll see our videos. These are the sessions on Saturday that we record. The one for this training session will be up within a couple of hours of us finishing this session. But as you go down and scroll down, you'll see that there are all kinds of topics. We have over 1.5 years of topics for these Saturday training sessions. This one's particularly interesting. Andrei Ilyaronov used to be Vladimir Putin's chief economic advisor until he defected to the United States because of his love of liberty. He's got a lot to say, and that's very interesting stuff. I provide some of these trainings. We have guest trainers that provide other ones, but all of this, again, is available to you free of charge. If you really like what you see and want to help us disseminate our information and build these farm teams of public office holders, citizen lobbyists, and activists, you can always contribute to Western Liberty Network by going to the support tab. And this is all handled by PayPal, so you know it's secure, and all contributions to Western Liberty Network are fully tax deductible. So that is my spiel. With that, I'm going to boy, that's a tongue twister. Stop sharing my screen. I'll bring Michaela Hammerson in, but we've got quite a good group today. We got 16 people now. That's wonderful. It's like the Brady Bunch went and had more kids on my screen. And so anyway, this is a lot of fun. And with that, I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Ken Morse. Once again, Ken is the state director for Western Liberty Network in Washington State, and he is also chair of the Informed Citizens Network, a group of organizations that spans the state of Washington. It's a venue within which activists work, and they are an affiliate of Western Liberty Network. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to address one of the most boring topics ever. People, when they think Robert's Rules of Order or bylaws, they kind of roll their eyes and it glazes over. But really, it's one of the keys that if you learn Robert's Rules, it's one of the important keys to being successful in the political arena. So why do we want to learn Robert's Rules of Order? Basically what I want to do is I want to help, I want to change your lens. I want to change how you look at things, and give you some, share some of my experiences so that you can know that you can, win in the arena of working in a political party. So I'm going to start with a few key definitions. And one of those is bylaws. What are bylaws? You'll hear about bylaws. Again, people's eyes usually glaze over when they think bylaws because they're kind of boring and dry. Basically what bylaws are is they're the formative document. They're like a corporate charter or like a constitution. Most bylaws reference Robert's Rules of Order, and the full name of that particular document is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. I'm just going to say Robert's Rules for sake of conversation. And Robert's Rules are parliamentary procedure. They're adopted by most organizations that I know of, and they're the rules of the road. They're how you run your meetings. So they were invented by a guy named General Henry M. Roberts, U.S. Army engineering officer, published in 1876. He did this, he's published this work so that he could have more effective meetings. And in the course of serving the U.S. Army. And he's not the only person to publish parliamentary procedures. Parliamentary procedure, the term parliamentary comes from the English Parliament. It was their procedures that were how they ran their meetings. And it's part of why the British Empire grew to be so big and so successful, is that they could get work done. And so the rules of the road are important. Thomas Jefferson wrote his own set of parliamentary procedures, as did other people. Roberts kind of collected all that stuff together and studied it and came up with, the revised thing. And it became quite, it's actually probably the most referenced parliamentary procedure thing, at least in the United States, if not the world. Okay, so bylaws, Robert's Rules of Order, quorum. The term quorum is basically, it means you have to have a certain number of people from within your organization in order to conduct business. Let's say your organization has 100 people. They're the voting membership. They'll do things like elect the executive board. They'll spend money. They'll make decisions. They're the people that decide things. And so a quorum, to be valid quorum, has to be representative of the organization. Robert's rules suggest that the minimum quorum should be a majority. That's 50% plus one vote. Okay, so in our example, our theoretical organization that we all belong to, there's 100 people, so that would be 51 people have to be present in a meeting for the decisions of the meeting to be binding. And if you lose your quorum, you can sit around and twiddle your thumbs. About the only thing you can do at that point is set the date for the next meeting. Now, you can also get your quorum back, and unless the bylaws prohibit people from coming back into the meeting. So let's say you have 51 people, you're doing business, and someone says, you know, I got a doctor's appointment. So long. You lost your quorum. You can't have an effective vote. But let's say two other people vote in, they come in late, and they say, hey, yeah, we're here. Okay, now you got 52 people. You can continue with your business. So you can lose a quorum, you can also get it back. So that is determined at the beginning of the meeting. You have to, this is why you sign into meetings mostly, is to determine whether or not we have a quorum. Then the next term is precinct committee officer, or PCO. These are elected people. I was elected 18 months ago, actually 19 months ago. And the precinct, what a precinct is it's the smallest subdivision, political subdivision in the state. So your state is chopped up into little bitty pieces called precincts. And so every county has their county precincts. Everyone, anyone in that precinct has the opportunity to run for precinct committee officer. There's one for Democrats. There's a position for Republicans. Those are the two PCOs, as we call them, that can be elected. But they're elected in the primary only. You don't go and get elected in the general. That's just what they do. It's at least in the state of Washington. So the precinct committee officers, the PCOs, they are the members of what's called the central committee. And I'm using Washington state terminology. I'm not sure if you use the same exact terminology, but I'm sure it's very similar. So the central committee is the members of the organization. And so they elect the executive board members, which is my next key definition. The executive board this would be the chairman, the secretary, the treasurer, etc. And there's some variation from county to county, sometimes there's one or two more officers, and these are elected officers. There are other positions, which I won't go into, they're appointed. So this would be various standing committees. These are your normal committees you always have. These would be something like the finance committee, people that are working on getting funds into the organization, etc. Those are appointed positions. So what is the purpose of parliamentary procedure? Basically, it's to promote healthy debate with minimized confusion. And that's really important, because if you don't have rules, if you don't have healthy debate, and if you're going to end up with a lot of confusion, and you're not going to be able to get anything done. So another purpose of parliamentary procedures is it balances the rights of the majority versus the rights of a minority. There can be more than one minority. Minority rights can be your rights as an individual PCO or individual member of the organization. And we'll get into that as to why. So parliamentary procedure makes a fair process. If the process is not fair, neither is the result. And then, okay, so I've covered that. So there's in my experience, and I've been involved since the 1980s in Republican, it happens to be Republican politics. The classic conflict is usually arises between the old timers and the new timers. You got the old timers, they've been, they're in power, but you got all these new people coming in. Some of the old timers are focused on preserving their political power at any cost. You're going to run into that. And their use or misuse of parliamentary procedure can be perceived very negatively. And so that's an issue that you're going to have to deal with if you haven't already. Now, the newcomers, generally, they're enthusiastic. They're focused on winning elections. They bring new talent to the organization, but they have limited knowledge on parliamentary procedure. And so they get a copy of the bylaws and they roll their eyes back like, this is really boring reading. That's very typical. But bylaws become very important. So I'd just like to, I'm going to skip over here a little bit. I'd like to deal just briefly with the question, what rules actually apply to our meetings? And the fundamental basis for our political meetings starts with your state law. State law has important things to say about positions and certain aspects of how the organizations are run. And it starts with state law. That's the highest authority, is state law generally. Below that, you have the state party laws. That is your state Democrat Party or state Republican Party. So there's a hierarchy. The top of the ladder is state law. The next rung down is your state party bylaws. Below that are your county bylaws. And most of what I'm speaking of today, I'm speaking from the perspective of county bylaws. So the state has a state organization, Republican or Democrat, and underneath that you have the various counties, or sometimes if you have some really small counties or really less populous counties, they may call it the tri-county such and such or something like that. There's not enough people there to warrant an individual party for each county. Anyways, that's kind of a detail. Below that, you have so you have your county bylaws, and then the county bylaws. In my experience, I always reference Robert's Rules of Order. So, what takes precedent is state law, state party law bylaws, county bylaws. And Robert's Rules of Order comes in and are the rules of the meeting, except where anything above it conflicts with Robert's rules. So, and that's an important thing to understand, because each county has some real nuances in how the bylaws affect what you can do and how you can do it. And then below that, there's custom. So custom kicks in where, for instance, in the county that I live in, it's customary for central committee members to be able to attend the executive board meetings. Now, in some counties, these executive board meetings may actually be, may prohibit anyone other than if they want someone to come in and talk about a certain subject. So that's customary. It's not in our bylaws, but it's customary. Most people don't, most central committee members don't attend the executive board meetings. I've attended a few of them, and they can be very interesting. So that's the hierarchy of what what laws apply and when. Now, interesting thing came up recently that there was an issue. Oh, hello. Okay, missed that. So there came up an issue about basically like personality conflict between the chairman and an elected what's called legislative district chair. And it turned out that the whole thing hinged upon a state Supreme Court decision 4 years ago, which the bylaws had not been changed, nor the state law had actually not been changed. But the decision of the group was swayed by, and rightfully so, by the state Supreme Court decision from 4 years ago. But the law had not been changed on the books in the state of Washington. So there was a lot of consternation over that. So this has come up a couple of times where, for instance, there was a big controversy about whether or not we should meet in person during COVID. As it turns out, there had been a decision either by, I think, probably the government or actually probably the state legislature, that yes, we must permit meetings via Zoom, or computer meetings. As it turns out, that was in conflict with Robert's Rules of Order, which says that does not recommend Zoom meetings or electronic meetings for large groups, especially where there may be contentious issues. And our experience was people were disenfranchised in the Zoom meetings. They didn't get the vote. Oops. And also they were not recognized by the chair when they wanted to be recognized. So it was massively confusing. About half of us actually met at a meeting place and were able to coordinate and be more successful in the meeting because we were in the same room together. We could talk to each other. We could look at each other in the eye, and we prevailed on a critical vote by one single vote because we met. So, but it was state law that said you've got to allow Zoom meetings. It was the COVID thing, So that is that. So just a few tips. First of all, you're going to be way more effective if you don't let people get under your skin. So name calling is totally inappropriate. And questioning other people's motives. Like, Mr. Smith wants to do this because such and such. No, you don't question people's motives. You debate issues, not personalities. And that's just, it's when you get new people coming in, it's easy to feel like someone stepped on your toes. So relationship building is one of your best tools. If you can go to functions and talk with people, they'll realize, hey, you're a human being too. And, you'll be able to discuss things. And it's those relationship building opportunities that are really, really important. Otherwise, you're a bunch of strangers getting together, say once a quarter, and we're going to describe critical issues. And, it's hard to read people's minds. Anyways, so avoid the us versus them mentality. Learn to kind of a lesson. It was interesting. I mentioned that a term which is commonly batted around the particular party that I'm in, and all of a sudden I had 4 people screaming at me. So I dial it back. I owned it. but name calling is in the short run, it may feel good, but in the long run, just avoid it, because it's just not gonna, you're not gonna be able to win people over. What I found is that people come into a political process and they assume it's us against them. Well, you're the old timers versus the new timers, and it creates a bad expectation that you won't be able to win someone over to your point of view. And that's just simply not the case. I've been in enough meetings over the years to know that some people that, there's some people that are just, partisan poison pills. Okay. You're not gonna win them over to you. Maybe you're America first, maybe you're, someone is, a lot more liberal than that. Some of these people you won't be able to win over, but you can win over a lot more people than you might realize. Give people a chance to succeed. Give people a chance to agree with you. Remain respectful and make your case. And you may win or may lose, but respect the process. Part of that process, of course, is Robert's rules. So pretty much covered that. Oh, okay. Working together with like-minded people that say would agree with 80% of what you want to accomplish or what you want to see at the end of the day when the process is finished. Getting together ahead of time as a small group or a large group, that's how politics is often won or lost. The people that organize and practice together will be far, far more successful than, well, I just showed up at the meeting, I hope it goes my way. And so, and getting together with people also builds confidence. I've been involved in the last 18 months in the political party that that I'm involved in. And we were having real trouble. There was a lot of confusion in the meetings, partly because of COVID, partly because of the old timers wanted to go their way, period. And so they used our ignorance against us. I've been, as I said, been involved since the 1980s, the late 80s. So it's not my first rodeo. And I realized that the difficulty we were having is that people just didn't know enough about Robert's rules to be able to navigate the political process. So for instance, the chairman would call someone out of order when they shouldn't have, or would forget a parliamentary important principle. So I taught a group of people how to address that. So the chairman, well, for instance, voting. The chairman, usually it's a voice vote. The chairman will take a voice vote, and the chair will say the yeas have it or the noes have it. And very clearly, we were losing those votes, even though we were certain that we had the votes, but it was being called adversely against us. So I taught people that to call and ask for a division of the House. Now, division of the House is a minority right. It's one of your minority rights. Any one member can call for a division of the House, and the voting has to be done usually through a standing vote instead of a voice vote. And so it came down to we were voting on a certain position in the executive chair that had become vacant, or the executive board that had become vacant, and the ayes have it. And well, let's see. Well, anyways, so we called for a division of the House, and we won it on the division of the House. So there's a lot more to it than that. But that's one of the basics. is if you don't think that the chairman's calling it correctly, you have a right, and it doesn't require a second. Any one person can stand up and ask for a division of the House. So you don't want to use that if you already know that you really did lose. You want to be careful not to spend all your political capital. Otherwise, if you're just, objecting to things all the time, it's going to irritate people. You want to decide which hill to die on, and not attack every hill, so to speak. So I'm gonna introduce you to a bunch of resources, but the two main ones. This is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, or Robert's Rules, and it is over 700 pages long. This is the Bible, okay? But there's another resource which I think is one that I would recommend over the big book. There's a smaller version. It's Robert's Rules in brief. This is less than 200 pages long. And I want to go through a few of these just basic stuff so that you get a flavor for, first of all, this tells you where to look. This is probably your best resource. It's easier to read than the big book, and it gives literal examples, and we'll just look at a few of these. So I'm starting here on happens to be page 12. What happens at a meeting? That's the chapter title. And I'm just going to touch on a few points so that you get a flavor for it. So the presiding officer, the person that presides over the meeting, is usually the chairman. And their purpose is to enforce the rules and to designate who's going to speak. All communication goes to the chair and comes back from the chair. So when you want to speak, you rise and you address the chair, Mr. Chairman. The chairman, there may be more than one person doing that. He'll have to pick one of you. And so let's say it's your turn. So, Mr. Morse. And in our context locally, that you'll be recognized, and then you state your name and you state your precinct. So I would say, Mr. Chairman, and they'll acknowledge me, and I'll say, Ken Morse, Forest Precinct. I rise to a point of order. So that would be one of the things that you can do. So you need to get recognition. There are a few instances where you can interrupt someone. For instance, if the process is going haywire and Robert's rules or the rules of the organization are not being followed, you rise to a point of order. You can actually interrupt the chairman on this, and it doesn't require a second. Most motions, they're called motions. Most motions require a second, but point of order doesn't. Now, the reason that some things don't require a second, and the reason that sometimes you can actually interrupt the chair is to keep within the rules themselves. That's about the only thing. You just can't arbitrarily not like something and say, point of order, I don't like that. You'll be called out of order and asked to sit down. And you probably should at that point. So anyways, I want to talk a little bit about quorum. I've already talked about. So there's kind of basically two meeting formats that are commonly accepted. There's called the standard order of business. It's to simplify it. It's an order of business. This is understood that this is how we do stuff. And so it can be as simple as reading and approving the minutes from the last meeting, listening to reports like the treasurer report or the fundraising report, dealing with unfinished business. If the meeting was adjourned without finishing business from last meeting, this is where this, well, okay, so we were doing such and such, and we stopped debate and we ended the meeting. And so that would be unfinished business and then new business. But the standard order of business is not usually how things are done. Usually an agenda is published before the meeting. But the interesting thing about the agenda is we were having a problem with this, is that things were not getting onto the agenda that were important. And people had things that they wanted to speak to, issues they wanted to bring up. And oh, that's not on the agenda. That's not on the agenda. And so we got to move on. We got to move on. And so the chairman was doing that sort of stuff. But as I taught people Robert's rules, one of the things that you needed for an agenda to be binding, it must be adopted by the group at the beginning of the meeting. So that little step was being skipped by the chairman, and she was getting her way. I won't say, I don't want to impugn her intentions. It probably was just inexperience, but people were not happy with this because there were important issues that they felt they needed to bring up. So an example of agenda, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but early on, usually you have opening ceremonies, an invocation or prayer, a pledge of allegiance, and then what should be on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And the chairman will ask, is there any other business that needs to be put on the agenda? Basically, they'll ask that, should ask that. If not, the agenda is accepted. No one speaks up, then that's approval of the agenda. One of the things that one of our members did is she said, point of order, and says, I want to amend, or excuse me, she said, I moved to amend the agenda by adding the item of new business. And so that kind of slowed things down a little bit, and it forced a vote because it was an amendment, or excuse me, a motion. And we got that added in. And then we were able to, we kind of been working on this together, learning the rules, learning how to navigate this. And we were successful to get some issues raised, which would have been just, brushed on by. So the interesting thing, I'm going to go on to adjournments, recesses, and standing at ease. I'm just going to touch on adjournment. We had an interesting situation where no one liked the new bylaws 18 months ago when we had our reorganization meeting. And someone stood up, it was kind of like late in the evening, and said, I move to adjourn the meeting. And we hadn't finished everything that was on the agenda. That's legal to do. The whole group said, so it was put to a vote, and the whole group said, yeah, we're going home. So it created all sorts of consternations downstream, and we never did get new bylaws passed. So we have existed for the last 18 months on our original bylaws. And I won't go into that. That's its own story. I could spend a whole hour on that. So I want to get to the main meat and potatoes right now. And this is how to make a motion. A motion is business that comes before the assembly, and it's where we make decisions. So I'll deal with what's called the main motion. And there are different types of motions. I'm not going to go into that. If you want to get into that, then the big book will really dive deep into that sort of stuff. Richard has made, I believe, available a couple of items, one called a cheat sheet, and I think other one was I forget the name of it. But anyways, those are great references, and that's a good place to start, and it'll talk about types of motions. So the main motion is a formal proposal by a member in a meeting that the group takes certain action. For instance, I move, Madam Chairman, yes, member Ken Morris, Forest Precinct, I move that we double the amount of money that we're giving to candidate Smith. And so it's moved, and someone will second that. If you got to have one agreement in most instances to get a motion to go forward. If there's no second, most motions die, and you move on to other stuff. It's been moved and seconded. And then you get to speak. You get to speak up to 10 minutes, according to Robert's rules, unless someone moves to limit debate, like only just limit it to 3 minutes, or if it's in the agenda that debate will be limited to 3 minutes. So that's important to know, that you have a right to speak for 10 minutes in general. Otherwise, some people will cut you off, which would be a point of order. But anyways, so the main motion brings business before the assembly. So how do you, so you stand up, and after the previous speaker is finished, and standing up is important. In smaller groups where there's a lot of cohesiveness and there's not a lot of disagreement, you can be very casual about stuff. So if you have a small group, say executive committee, you can more or less just kind of discuss through things, and it's a lot more amenable. But in the bigger assemblies, it becomes too tumultuous, too confusing, and things don't go as well. So you wait for someone to stop speaking, they sit down, then you stand up and address the chair, Madam Speaker, or Mr. Speaker, or Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair. And then you get authorized to speak, and you make the motion, and typically you're the first one that gets to speak about the motion. And everyone can speak twice on any given subject, but there's some limitations and guidance for that. For instance, in a big assembly, we did this at the state reorganization meeting, where there was a hot topic that was being discussed. And the chairman very wisely said, okay, this microphone on the left will be pro, and this microphone on the right will be con. And so people lined up accordingly, because a lot of people wanted to speak. And then they alternated back and forth between pro and con, pro and con, pro and con. That's a really good way to navigate through, say, a difficult issue, or an issue where it's really a hot issue. Now, it's important that you be prepared to write your motion down, especially and come prepared to the meeting with it all written out. If you're expecting a real important issue to be addressed, and you have something that would be really, you feel this motion needs to be, we need to amend, we need to either make a motion or we need to amend a motion, have that ready to go if at all possible, or have someone write it down so that the wording is exact. We don't vote on our feelings. We don't vote on vague things. We vote on specific wording. Sometimes it's as simple as, I move to strike the word "and" in the third sentence after the word such and such. So writing it down helps the secretary do their job, because they're taking minute meetings and they're documenting the whole process, and that documentation is really important. So we don't vote on vague ideas. We vote on specific, exact language. And the chair may require that motions be submitted in writing. And so after you make the motion, you sit down and wait until you're given an opportunity by the chair, and you'll usually be first, to justify the reasoning for your proposal. So seconding a motion, I'm going to refer to the cheat sheet that Richard's got out there. It'll tell you what motions need a second and what motions don't. Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, has a lot to say on this. Most of it you won't need. And this is the value of, Robert's in brief. This is the value of cheat sheets. And and it really, really helps. So after a motion is made, and after there is debate back and forth on it, there'll come a time where the chairman will say, is there any more discussion? No more discussion, great. So the chair will repeat the motion, and if there's an amendment, I'm not going to deal with amendments today. I'm going to let you read about that. But you, by the time, it works this way. You make a motion. It's the first thing you do. And then you can amend the motion. And then you can amend the amendment to the amendment. So, so what you do is you work it that way. And then you work backwards from there. You vote on the amendment first, and then, or the amendment to the amendment. Then you vote on the amendment. And then you get to vote on the amended motion. So it is, the chair will read out the amended motion. Most motions don't get amended twice. There's usually just one amendment. And so the amendment may or may not pass, but then you have to deal with the motion as amended, if it has been. And so the chair states the question. So, and you people, if debate's dragging on, you can call for the question. And if you get, I believe it's 50% or plus agree with you, Madam Chairman, I call for the question. This debate's been going on way too long. And so if you get enough people agree with you, that cuts off debate. Or the chairman will say, any more debate? No more debate. And they end it. So they call for the question, or they state the question. And so they read the amended main motion, and then you all vote on it. Now, if as I say, if you think that the chairman has unfairly called the vote in favor or against, you can call for a division of the House. And then usually it goes to a standing vote. There's more rules on it than this, but that gives you the basics. And we've won debates that way, and so forth. So let's go on to the next one. I'm going to actually, I'm going to stop here, because I pretty much covered the things that that I think are most beneficial. But I want to talk just briefly about other resources. You're going to have to educate yourself. robertsrules.org, www.robertsrules.org is the Roberts Rules of Order people. And they have some really great frequently asked questions. And of course, they'll sell you the book, the 714-page book or the 197-page book. I would start with 197. Most of you are not going to need much beyond that. If you want to become a parliamentarian or more knowledgeable in parliamentary practice, get the big book. There's lots of YouTube videos for free. You can type in any rule that you want, and you can get an exam. Various people have examples of what it looks like in real time, and there are debating societies that debate using Robert rules as a matter of course. There are debate contests. And then WLN has some fantastic summary sheets. I believe those are provided for you today or will be made available. And they're certainly available, I believe, on the website. So I'm Richard, are you there?
I am here.
Great. Hey,
go
ahead.
I was going to say, I got a question from Marion in
please.
Portland. She asked about whether the Toastmasters or the Rotary Club are good venues to practice Robert's Rules of Order. And I will say this, if you've been watching the chat window, I posted something that made it very clear that this session that you're attending today is not meant for you to listen to and then emerge an expert in Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is complex, and it takes time, it takes some study. That's why this is a primer, something to get you started. But there really is no better way to learn Robert's Rules of Order than to dive in. And to dive in, you need to participate and use Robert's Rules of Order and see it being used.
Yeah.
One way you can do that is if you are a member of a political party, whether it be the Republican, Libertarian, Constitution, whatever it is attend and participate in your local, county, and state party meetings. To my knowledge, they all use Robert's Rules of Order, and you can participate in those. If you are just starting an organization, maybe it's a political PAC or something like that, you'll want to start using Robert's Rules of Order right away to establish that it is something that's used. If you never use Robert's Rules of Order and then try to turn to it when you have a problem, it usually doesn't go well because people aren't in the habit of using it. You know, Robert's Rules of Order is like a gun. You know, you need it in case something goes wrong, and you better know how to use it even if nothing ever goes wrong. It's designed to make sure that everyone is treated fairly when conflict arises. Another way you can learn is by attending local government meetings. They generally use Robert's Rules of Order, and you know, you can see it being used. It's good to go to a public meeting where there's conflict or contentious issue, because they will have to use Robert's Rules of Order more than often than if all the board members get along and they agree on everything. So that's another way to learn it. Another way is to go to the National Association of Parliamentarians. They can provide a lot of resources. They've got a lot of videos dedicated to this specific topic. I just got another, yeah, Sherry Brady just says that the Oregon Cattlemen's Conference is a good place to see Robert's Rules of Order in action. Lynette asks what the difference is between Mason's rules and Robert's rules. Maybe you can answer that, Ken. I've heard of Mason's rules, but I don't know very much about it.
I've not heard of Mason's rules. I'm just aware that there are various resources out there. Thomas Jefferson, I think I mentioned, had his own version of how to do parliamentary procedure.
The Senate has its own rules. The state Senate has its own rules. What Robert's Rules is one of many parliamentary authorities.
Right.
And in the bylaws of an organization, it should have an article saying what the organization's parliamentary authority is. Theoretically, if you have a set of bylaws and the bylaws don't say what the parliamentary authority is, then there is none, and you've got no established way. If someone starts using Robert's Rules of Order, somebody could literally object and say, well, why are you using Robert's Rules of Order? Where do you get the authority to use that? Why don't we use this other system? And it's a good question, which, you know, so it's a good idea to have, whether it's Mason's rules or Robert's Rules of Order or some other rule. There's one that's based on achieving consensus. There are a lot of different parliamentary authorities, but if you have an organization, your organization should have an article. Article 9, Robert's Rules of Order, as newly revised, will be the parliamentary authority of this organization on all matters not covered by the bylaws or
except where there's a conflict with the bylaws.
Then the bylaws win. And you can create what are called standing rules under Robert's Rules of Order. And if you create standing rules under some circumstances, they can be less powerful than bylaws because they can't violate bylaws, but they can override Robert's Rules in some cases. You know, dive in and use this stuff. But I did provide a link to the National Association of Parliamentarians. If you use the 300 question document that I uploaded for you and study them, the 100 questions needed to enter the organization are included. So if you study them, you can't fail. And you'll also have a decent working knowledge short of practice on it. Now, Michaela, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Cool. So I think you're a little bit familiar with our organization. Richard, you did attend one of our meetings, but my question is about if you have Robert's Rules established outside of our bylaws. So our bylaws actually say if it's not specified in the bylaws, we revert to Robert's Rules, but we have a board that's not very familiar with Robert's Rules of Order and doesn't tend to follow or even recognize that there's an authority there. And so we run into situations where procedurally things aren't necessarily done correctly. And yet we're finding we don't have any teeth to enforce anything because it's just not being done the right way. Is there any recourse? Is there, like, from a legal standpoint, if it is written in our bylaws, is there any way to enforce that things are done correctly?
In theory, yes. State law, it's a little bit problematic. I mean, you're not going to arrest anyone or throw them in. I guess you're in the Republican Party, so there is no Republican Party jail you can arrest people and throw them into. But there are state laws which say that candidates that are nominated for public office by a political party must be nominated in accordance with the organizational documents of your party. Organizational documents meaning bylaws and rules and such. So if this impacts a candidate nomination, you sometimes do have recourse in state law. Short of that, what I would do if I were you is I would begin documenting instances where the bylaws or Robert's Rules of Order are violated. Be specific. Which rule was violated? Which bylaw? Which rule in Robert's Rules was violated? Come up with a list of those. And, I would, outside of a meeting firsthand, if you can do it without embarrassing people, outside of a meeting, say, look, this is the list I came up with. This isn't personal. I want us to follow our own rules. How can we be expected? How can the candidates we nominate be expected to follow their oaths, to obey the Constitution of the United States, if we can't even follow our own rules? Here are some rules that I think were broken, not on purpose, but try to get the people on your board to acknowledge that the rules were not followed. If they say, oh, that doesn't matter, well, you've at least got an admission that they're not following the rules. And at the next county or state election, you can use that, right, as a way to provide accountability. But most of the time when people violate rules, sometimes it's for malicious reasons, or sometimes it's for reasons for political control, but most of the time it's because of ignorance. They don't know what they're doing. And training solves that. And a lot of people in organizations don't bother to get themselves trained. They just do what they see on Perry Mason or other shows. And if you confront them publicly, they take it personally. So try to take the personal aspect of it out, show them what they're doing wrong, offer them ways to educate themselves and improve themselves in a non-confrontational environment. Most people will appreciate that. The ones who are out for their own motives will be the ones who don't like it. And then you'll know who they are. Yeah. So that gives you a place to start anyway. It's good to see you, Michaela, by the way. Kathy, you've got a comment.
Hi. I think that Michaela, one of the things that she's referring to, we have a chairman who runs the meetings without even following the rules of order and will not allow any outside voice. Basically, he's running them like you have to get approval. You can only speak once. He doesn't know the rules at all. So our meetings are so off pace to start with. So are you suggesting then, because like I said, if you have a chair who refuses to follow the rules during the meeting, where do you go?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
How we address this, one of the ways I address this is I wrote everyone in the Central Committee a letter. And I said, here's some rules that you may not be aware of. And what I trained people to do was to appeal the decision or appeal to the decision of the chair. So you have a situation where the chairman's not following the rules. You rise to a point of order, which does not require a second. So, Madam Chairman, I rise to a point of order. And she says, state your point. And I state my point saying, Robert's, our rules, require such and such. And, it's a procedural thing. And then she'll say, in this particular case, well, the decision of the chair is, that's not valid. So at that point, and this was a key in winning some really important battles, I say, Madam Chairman, I appeal the decision of the chair. And what I did was, in my letter, I said, appealing the decision of the chair forces the group to vote on it. It takes it out of the hands of the chair. Now, the chairman will state, well, the chair's position is such and such, and you say it's such and such. Who agrees with me? Basically, it's a little more formal than that. And you can sometimes win the day by appealing the decision of the chair, and then the group decides whether the chair's right or whether the rules are right. That's what it has to come down to.
I'm going to reinforce what Ken says a little bit. Let's say, for example, that someone wants to suspend the rules. Let's say that you're going to vote on something and a secret ballot is required by the bylaws. Okay. The chair might say, okay, we're going to raise our hands and vote on this issue. Someone could say, I rise to a point of order. And ideally, the chair is supposed to say, what is your point? But sometimes if a chair is rude, they won't bother to ask you what your point is. So sometimes you can say, Mr. Chair, it says in Article 5, be specific. Article 5, Section 2 of the bylaws, that votes of this kind must be by secret ballot. Okay. And so the chair might say, oh, we don't need to do it in this case. We don't need a secret ballot. So we're just going to suspend with that. And then what he's done in that case is ruled against you. You've raised a point of order, and that person has said, blown you off basically, and made a ruling that they're not going to obey the rule. So what you can then do, you can interrupt the chair. You can say, Mr. Chair, I appeal the decision of the chair. And at that point, the chair must say, okay, the chair has been appealed. We're going to take a vote on whether or not to sustain the chair or to overturn the chair. And who wants to sustain? Who wants to overturn? Now, if the chair refuses to do that, there are clauses in Robert's Rules of Order that allow another member of the assembly to preside over that question and go around the chair. Right. This happens in very dysfunctional organizations, and it is a bad sign whenever this sort of thing happens. What I find is that most people are ignorant of the rules. They don't know what to do. When they make a mistake and are confronted on it, their pride takes over. They become emotionally defensive, and they don't, at that point, they don't know what the heck they're doing at all. Whenever you can, if you notice someone who is not following the rules, go through the process, but document the situation. And then after the situation is over, when you're out of the meeting, like Ken suggests, write a letter to all of the members who have the ability to vote. If it's a political party, it might be your central committee. If it's a corporate board of directors, it might be the people who are on the board, right? And say, and without insulting that person, saying, the chair has not been following our rules. These are the specific instances when the rules were broken. These are the specific rules that were broken. This is how those rules were broken. This is what should have been done. Write a letter like that, give it to everyone. And it's going to tell you very quickly whether your organization is completely corrupt or whether you just have an ignorant chair who, and when I say ignorant, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean somebody who just does not know what they're supposed to do. And arrange to get a training program for your people. Have someone from Western Liberty Network like Ken or myself come out and provide on-the-spot training for your organization on Robert's Rules. It would be more than just like this 1 hour thing here. It'll be a longer event, a more substantial event. Or I would encourage you to get all of the members of your organization who are capable of, who are empowered to vote on things, to join the National Association of Parliamentarians. If you join this organization, you cannot fail. Just getting in, by getting in, you have to pass a 100 question test. Those 100 questions are taken from a pool of 300 questions, which are in a document I sent to you on email. Anyone who studies these questions can't fail. And once you've studied those questions, you've got a reasonable working of Robert's Rules of Order, and then you can check each other during a meeting as to your understanding of different things. So just by getting into the Robert's Rules of Order, you will make people more competent. You'll also make people more confident. But when they're educated and confident, you'll be surprised at people who become more reasonable when they know what's happening, because they're no longer afraid of a system that overwhelms them. They understand a system that they can be a part of, and they know how to function within. Let's see, there's some other questions here.
Okay.
Does the vote go to the board members only or to the CC? What's the CC? This is from Loretta.
That would probably
Hi,
be the
it's
central
the
committee.
central committee. Yeah.
Central committee. Okay, well,
Yeah.
Again, this is not designed to be specific to the party, but your bylaws say who can vote in any particular meeting. In a state meeting, it might be one group of people. In a county meeting, it might be another group of people. But when there is a vote to appeal the decision of the chair, that vote is put to all of the members who are eligible to vote in that deliberative assembly. You agree with that, Ken?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. And so that's what would go toward. And Kathy gave us a nice word. Thank you, Kathy.
I have a quick question. If this is just a board meeting that is a monthly board meeting, and there are central committee members that are there, and then also the public watching, if there is a problem with the way that the chair is handling things, or a question about it, and there's an appeal made to the chair, that's my question. Or is it only the board members that can vote during that time? Or is it also the central committee people that are there during that meeting, that monthly meeting? I'm not talking about like a meeting where all of the committee.
No.
Okay,
Good question.
thank you.
Good question. No, only the board members vote in that sort of meeting. We're talking about the executive board. So the chairman, the first and second vice chair, state committeeman, state committee, et cetera, et cetera. So there's like, usually about 8 or 9 people in the room. And so unless you're invited to speak in our organization, in the political organization I'm in, you can attend, but you're just watching. And so often people that attend are highly motivated because they have an issue or they're really curious and they want to speak. And then they get offended because, well, you're not permitted to speak. What do you mean I'm not permitted to speak? I'm a precinct committee officer. Well, that's where you have to know the bylaws and what the bylaws, stipulate. Typically the e-board, depending on the organization, depending on the bylaws, actually Roberts does not recommend that executive board meetings be either televised or attended by anyone other than the executive board. That's my reading.
Right.
And
Another
so
way to answer that question is, there will be I'm a member of the Libertarian Party, and for years what we had is we would have conventions where anyone who is a delegate is a part of the assembly, and all of them would have a vote on whether or not to overrule the chair. Then we have state committee meetings.
Right.
State committee meetings, only those who are on the state committee would be eligible to vote on a motion to overturn the chair in a state committee meeting.
Right.
And then sometimes it would be executive committees where you've got just the officers. And in executive committee meetings, only the officers who are named as members of the executive committee in your bylaws would be eligible to overrule the chair in an executive committee meeting. So this is where you need to study the bylaws. And this is, again, Western Liberty Network, 501c3. We don't oppose or support any political party. But whether you're in a political party or a corporate board or a nonprofit board or anything else, if you've got Robert's Rules of Order named as your parliamentary authority in your bylaws, then it provides a pretty good guide. And whoever is in the particular deliberative assembly at hand, the members of that deliberative assembly have a right to vote on whether or not to overrule the chair in a given circumstance. Does that help you, Loretta?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So it becomes really important if there are board members that are ignorant, and again, I'm just using it like you did, and don't understand the process, and then maybe what is a way can a letter be sent out to the central committee, to the PCPs in this incident, and informing them of what's happening, or is that against I mean, I'm just questioning, how do we replace board members then if
Right.
there is if there's a quorum of ignorant people, then how do you fix that? That's a
Yeah.
question.
You train them. You have to train them.
Now,
Yeah.
I'd like to comment a little bit about sending letters out. It can be a two-edged sword. I do not recommend sending out anonymous letters. Some people are fearful and they don't want to be identified as being a complainer or whatever. First thing, when I sent out letters, or actually it was an email, I was accused by the chair of trying to speak on behalf of the party, which I had no intention whatsoever of doing. I addressed that by sending, it had to be an email in this case. I sent emails, oh no, I'm not trying to speak for the party. These are my own opinions. So say that up front. If you send out a letter, so this is my opinion and here are the facts. And yeah, don't assume the best of people, that it is ignorance and it's not, subversiveness.
Yeah.
Even if it is subversiveness, you'll look better for it. And so, yeah, it's really trying to control the speech of others. I take umbrage at. If someone wants to send me a letter, that's fine. That's great. I wouldn't be offended. I just take it as their opinion. But yeah, so provide people with the tools that they need, and remain respectful, respect the process, and respect people you disagree with.
And as you advocate training, I would not say, you screwed up all these times, you need to get trained. The way I'd put it is I would say, Robert's Rules of Order is how we're supposed to do business. We need to do things right. I recommend that the entire board gets Robert's Rules of Order training, and that we make it available to any precinct person or anyone else who wants it, so that we are known to conduct business properly and that we're known to conduct business fairly. We've made mistakes, but hey, we all make mistakes. Let's make fewer mistakes and let's get trained. Something like that.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay. Got a thumbs up from Loretta. That's good. Loretta just contributed to Western Liberty Network. Thank you, Loretta. By the way, I'm going to put in a shameless plug here. Western Liberty Network is beginning a summer-long training campaign in Oregon and Washington. We're going to be training grassroots volunteers in skills that will help them more effectively support the campaigns they care about, like how to canvass a neighborhood, how to get out the vote, how to run your own earned media campaign, how to use social media to support the campaigns that you support, a lot of these things. And if you would like to help us, you can make a tax-deductible contribution from the Support WLN tab at the www.westernlibertynetwork.org website. Sherry Brady points out that we'll be hosting some of those trainings in Douglas County. That's true. I've been asked to provide some training down there, and I'm going to, but it's hotel, it's gas, it's all these things. So anyone who would like to, your contribution would be valid. Even $50 gets us driven down the state. So that's my shameless plug. Do you have anything else, Ken?
No, that's it. Practice, practice, practice. Gather a group of friends around you and do this together.
Yep.
And
Oh, hey,
yeah.
Luana just asked me a question. Who do we contact to arrange training for our county? The answer is contact me. Either I or expert volunteer trainer will be the one to actually provide the training. You can contact me at the phone number shown on our Contact WLN website, 503-970-1876, or you can email me at rpbcentral, that's Robert Paul Baker, the word central @gmail.com, and we'll get you on our calendar, which is filling up rapidly. So does anyone else have anything for the good of the order today before we call it a session? Okay, thank you very much, Janae, for your kind words. Marion, I see your face. It's good to have you here. I hope to see you some more. And I want to thank our guest, Ken Morse, superstar, for coming in and offering us this training session today. And I would like to thank all of you, not just for attending today, but for stepping up and making yourself more effective as someone that's fighting for limited government wherever you live. So one more chance. Anything else for anyone else? Kathy, you've got your hand up. Oh, it looks like you're clapping. Thank you. That's great. Anyone
No.
else? Okay, very good. God bless
I,
you all. We'll have another training next. Oh yeah, Ken, go ahead.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
That's right. There's been a motion to
Second.
adjourn. Doesn't require a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned. God bless.